Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is completely terrible right now. I don't know if the format has ever been worse, and it's truly not been fun to play. Straight up miserable. I know Farfa has already talked about this.
I hope the bear gets rabies.
And I know it's a big reason why Josh is shifting away from Master Duel. I wanted to add my own 2 cents, as I know this is still a somewhat active discussion. Now, I guess before I get into my opinions and my ranting, if you will, remember guys that I encourage you to comment below and to discuss anything related to Yu-Gi-Oh with me. Just remember to do so civilly and treating people with respect, because people forget that sometimes in a heated debate, let's all be friends here, because it's just a game after all. But on that topic, oh god, games are supposed to be fun, right? Because I've certainly not been feeling the way Master Duel is. Let me give you guys some context. Now, this matters most importantly for myself and other competitive players right now, because one of the main ways to qualify for the World Championship is through the Duelist Cup system, which of course there's 3 a year and then a WCQ. So we have 4 events a year that matter to qualify for the World Championship, and that's only 4 events a year really that we have a chance to really try our asses off to do well. And the first Duelist Cup of this season is going to be this weekend. Oh, well, it's already started actually. Stage 1 is underway, but Stage 2 is the grind. It's a 72-hour kind of free play tournament where you earn points for winning and lose points for losing, and the highest ranking duelists will get points to go to the World Championship, and the winner just earns the invite straight up. Yeah, it's a big deal this weekend, and it should be a ton of fun to watch people stream and make content over it and compete. But as a competitor, I'm looking at this through the lens of someone trying to master the format, trying to learn what's going on, as well as figure out what decks and what techs are going to thrive in the environment. So it also means even beyond just 72 hours of dueling, I've been playing a lot in preparation to, again, hone my craft. It's been rather frustrating. Even before this month, others like myself have voiced their opinions that Maliss creates a toxic environment, and Master Duel hasn't been fun for a while as a result, ever since that set came out with Maliss in July. Partially because it feels impossible to play against going second. Most hand traps do almost nothing. Ash Blossom, for example, is notoriously bad against Maliss, and even other hand traps like Imperm and Veiler do very little, and you can oftentimes just be entirely overridden. And it's the same argument that we've talked about in the past with cards like Snake Eye and Yubel, where you have to Imperm early on to stop them altogether, because they start playing, they spiral so fast that there's no choke points and there's no way your hand traps can actually be meaningful. It means that there's very little decision making when interacting with the opponent when you go second, and it also means that if you don't stop them, it's not like they're going to end in a weaker field. They're just going to make the full field while you've lost cards in your hand. And these combo decks where you have to hit the starters and pray that it works, like against Maliss and the new Risle variants, you lose that dynamic, and it creates these games that feel over within the first 5 seconds of the duel. You're comparing both hands, they summon the starter, you see if you can handle it. And the World Championship felt like that too. The going first win rate for World Championship this year was incredibly high, and that's even considering that there wasn't all Maliss and Risle. There were other decks that had to be played as well. And when that's the case, of course, those other decks are going to be worse, because you have 2 better ones and then a worse deck. Still, if you watched that tournament, you'll know that oftentimes the games felt immediately over within the first turn, and even when you got to play going second into a field, anything you could try and accomplish felt almost pointless. It also stems from the fact that Maliss has an excellent resource follow-up, because you're putting a bunch of cards in grave that all trigger immediately when banished, and you have many ways to do that, with March Hare cycling back in itself being an easy one. So even if you're able to exit on the field as Risle, it's almost false hope. If you can't exit on the field and deal with other stuff coming at you, it's still lost. You could take the perspective of playing a second deck and try to break the field with more dedicated board breakers, but it still rarely works against Maliss because the end field is so strong. And beyond just being strong, it's layered. And what that means is even if you clear the entire field, so kill every card, Duster, Lightning Storm, say both go off uncontested and the board is clear, they have March Hare now. They can banish Whitebinder from the grave, draw a card with Whitebinder. And mind you, their deck plays a ton of hand traps. They can draw off both Jessie Cat and Whitebinder. So they have 3 to 4 draws because they can Whitebinder on your turn as well. And then Whitebinder will banish from the grave a White Rabbit and a Cryptor. So now Cryptor is going to come back. It's going to be another banish, as well as the White Rabbit was going to set an MTP. So they have another banish. So now through you clearing the field and using 2 cards, they've drawn 4 cards, which can be more disruptions, as well as developed 2 non-targeting banishes, which are very premium disruptions. And this is on top of, you know, anything else that might be happening too. And mind you, this was all last format. This is all a month ago, because actually it's worse. People like myself were already kind of doom and gloom about the state of the format. I mean, I voiced my opinions of not liking Maliss in the TCG, and it took people a while to kind of come around to my way of thinking, and maybe some still haven't, but we're now in that position in Master Duel. One thing that Master Duel Maliss didn't have for the longest time is it didn't have the same card pool the other regions did. So no Ignister cards. That means no backup Ignister, no Wizard Ignister, and no Allied Code Talker at Ignister. It did have the advantage of being the only format with both Appaloosa and Link Decoded legal, with neither being legal in the TCG and me still finding the deck frustrating. And now in September, if you guys haven't been aware, those cards are out now. So Maliss is now the strongest it has ever been in any format. So it is stronger than it ever has been in both the TCG and the OCG, because it has the complete card pool with no restrictions. It has 2 gold sarcophagus as opposed to 1 in the TCG, and it also has Decoder and Appaloosa legal. And with this Allied Code Talker, that also means you now have access to an Omni Negate without having to play bad cards like Terahertz, in my opinion. So board breakers are even less effective, and the end board is even stronger, as well as Cyber's Wicked. Means that your end field can be like you have more bodies to make your end field. So it's not like you're choosing between Appaloosa and Terahertz, or sorry, Terahertz Allied Code. You're making both, and there are many hands where I go Appaloosa up top, and then you have Firewall below that, and then linked to that is your Allied Code Talker, and then of course you have March Hare in hand. So that's going to set up the Cryptor Banish, the MCP Banish, and the White Binder Banish. You get 4 draws in the process, and of course you have these 3 powerful boss monsters on your field. And that's really, really powerful. I shouldn't have to say that. Unless you mess up, you should not be able to lose these games. And the thing is, even if you do mess up using interactions, most hands your opponent will throw at you still cannot beat you. And even the dedicated breaker decks like Gem Knight and Tempai will have a hard time. Maliss creates this almost insurmountable threat with almost no way to handle it. What is the approach that's being taken to combat that? Because obviously, not like there's nothing you could do. There's not much, but it does get a bit worse. So obviously, the best way to handle Maliss is with Artifact Lancia, a lingering floodgate, something I've voiced as being very unhealthy for the game for a long time. That, of course, you tribute it in the hand, and until the end of the turn, your opponent cannot banish cards, or neither player can. But Maliss can not function that well under this card. With the new Ignister cards, they actually have some counterplay, but for one, it's not consistent, and 2, it's actually beatable. It's a half field. But then there are many hands where if they don't draw the right cards, they will just pass. The problem with that is, of course, Master Duel is best of 1. So for you to do that, you have to play Lancia in the main deck. Lancia is pretty useless against most other decks. Again, you're adding more variance to a game where now you're just going to draw Lancia in a bunch of cases where it's entirely useless. And in fact, you see other people switch away from Maliss just because every single person is main decking 3 Artifact Lancias. Of course, the other solutions to this are playing Maxi and Molcharmi Fualos. Fualos is honestly, I think, healthy into Maliss because it forces them onto a half field, and they can do so almost every time, and it gives you an actual fighting chance in some matchups. Not every. Risle, I think, still struggles into a Maliss half field, but that's a Risle problem, not a format problem. And I think if there were more cards that replicated that situation, you could have healthy games. Lancia is hit or miss if it accomplishes that, and Maxi goes too far because it's way too powerful going second. Still, the trend here is you're relying on Lingering Floodgates to even have a chance versus Maliss. Lingering Floodgates, of course, being cards that once activated imply an imposition or like some restriction onto the opponent that they cannot get rid of for the rest of the turn unless they place a new Lingering Floodgate on top, and we'll get to that as well because that's fun. Definitely my least favorite aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they, for what it's worth, have mostly been moving away from cards like this in terms of card design. But of course, Maxi still exists, one of the most infamous one. It's very frustrating to play against. It feels like the games are decided immediately and you have no real recourse, right? I've often defended Yu-Gi-Oh! As being a fast game that ends in 1-2 turns because as long as both players are interacting, making decisions, and actually engaging with each other within those 1-2 turns, it's fine. It's just the turn count isn't what matters. It's a matter of interactions. But when the game is over in 1 or 2 turns, but one player doesn't get to do anything, that isn't fun. That's not good Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that's relatively straightforward. You know, I have people argue against that, and I'll have to scratch my head and be like, what about this game do you enjoy then? Because for me, that's not interesting. It feels like flipping coins while playing solitaire at the same time, and that's not good. Yeah, the format has evolved into a point where people are main decking a lot of lingering floodgates because it feels like their only answer. And now Maliss's next best bet to combat this is to main deck Joel and Lockbird, which of course you'll know I also have great disdain for because it is yet another lingering floodgate. Stopping searching is truly backbreaking to decks that need to search. I feel like there are other ways to manage combos and resources with better disruptions than just saying you can't. Joel Lockbird is good in Maliss because Maliss does not search. So when you get Maxied or Fualos, you can Joel yourself, and then it's not a full combo, but it's enough of a combo that most decks still cannot win. And this time when I say most decks, I mean like 95% of decks can win, including the Maliss mirror match, because your end field, depending on what you drew to extend with, could just be the full field, but even if not, it's still rather strong. And it just entirely negates the Maxi or the Fu after one draw. Oh, and if you're playing a Risle deck and you're like happy that Joel Lockbird is used out of their hand, don't get ahead of yourself. Firewall Dragon can return it to the hand. If they see you like activate a bonfire on your turn, they go chain Firewall, add back Joel, and you just have fun because the game is still over. And that is even if Risle I felt like had a chance in that position. I really don't think it does. I guess it matters more for 10 pi decks that are more dedicated to breakers that might have a small chance because the Maliss player was denied the ability to draw cards like Impulse and Ash. Now Maliss has more outs to Maxi, but on top of that, they're playing more lingering floodgates, which means now if you're playing any other sort of deck to try and cope with the Maliss metagame and the Lancia minigame, like Risle, you're gonna get Droll to shit now, and Risle struggles with Droll. And on the topic of Risle has also become an uber oppressive deck. It's not, you know, we talked about it being somewhat engaging to play with back in December in the TCG, but Master Duel never had that option as Star Risle came out. Now, it's important to go back to what I said, where Risle had this choke point, where if you interacted with Duo Drive, you didn't stop them from playing altogether, but they ended on a half field, and then you could engage in a grind game. That is what many players like myself would consider a good game of Yu-Gi-Oh, because now it becomes actual critical thinking and you have to adapt. That's interesting, not memorizing combos and lines and bullshit. But with Star Risle, what happens is your opponent starts with X or Ice, or any of the searchers to get those, they can eventually get to an Ice to special summon a Star. Star then sets up Cross. Cross for one can stop hand traps, but now even if you have Imperm for Duo Drive, the Cross is there with Detonator. And the biggest thing is you want to deny that from happening, because Cross and Detonator as a combination is so hard to overcome. And now you just can't stop that with just an Imperm. You can't force them onto a half field. So unless you're drawing multiple hand traps, again, like Snake Eyes, you're forced on this approach of suffocating the starter, which is unreliable and creates, again, very boring games where you're crossing your fingers, your opponent just doesn't have more monsters. When you max your Fuwa, or if your opponent gets the full combo with Risle, they may just full combo anyways, because the deck's half field isn't that good. And they'll go for Starliege, Baguska, Duo Drive with the Cross and the traps. Starliege will make all the monsters untargetable, including itself, and then Baguska will be a floodgate. I'm sorry, at what point did I say I liked a floodgate that can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects? Awesome card design. And that's why, like, I've occasionally kind of pushed for a Baguska ban, because there are many formats where that card is just truly a wretch on the metagame. And it's not like the worst offender in this format, because again, I think Maliss is a bigger problem. But when players are forced to go for lingering floodgates and stuff, and they have to push through these cards to do what they can, they're enticed to go Baguska. And because breakers are so unfeasible right now, you can't play cards to beat the Baguska. The irony is, I've seen people play some board breakers to beat this Baguska, but then again, now you're putting bad cards against Maliss and more matchup variants, and general utility cards feel at an all-time low right now, because you have to dedicate into hoping you're playing into the right setup, builds to beat that setup, and then otherwise go first. Because if you're not doing one of those two things, you're just losing. Again, not interaction-based, not critical thinking-based, it's bad Yu-Gi-Oh! Risle is honestly also pretty toxic right now. I think Risle does have a little more interesting push behind it. For one, it's a little better going second into like fields, except for Maliss of all things. The mirror match itself is somewhat better. That deck can be interacted with in a grind game fashion sometimes, but it's still, I'm not thrilled with the way Risle interacts in the game. I think if Star Risle didn't exist, it'd be a lot better. Star Risle, talking of the card, is a card I've kind of gone a note to say it's one of the most worst designed cards in recent history. because I thought Risle was interestingly designed before then. The deck is linear. It doesn't have a whole lot of decision-making in combos. That's fine. Not every deck has to be a combo deck. But where the deck I felt was interesting was, again, you had these decision points where to interact with the deck, and depending on how you interacted, you'd have different outcomes you have to deal with, and it would force both players, again, to be flexible. Something that is lost within Yu-Gi-Oh! In this landscape, and it's very core piece of Yu-Gi-Oh's identity, the flexibility and utility within cards, and that's lost. Star's release meant that that flexibility got removed, because now you don't have one choke point, you have two, and you need two choke points to do something meaningful. And then the other problem with Star is it requires adding a brick to your deck to make it work. It is powerful enough that it is almost non-negotiable that you do play Star, but now you have another card you don't want to draw on your deck. And to me, it's like the worst type of card, a card that makes the deck hard to interact with, and very exceedingly so you have to play it, but it's also a bad draw in itself, so it still makes the deck less consistent, which is frustrating to play with and against, because if you're playing Risle, you don't want to brick, obviously, and when you're playing against any opponent, it may feel good to win, but it also feels rather unrewarding to watch your opponent go, oh, I guess I'll pass on their first turn, because they have nothing. I think cards need to reflect card design that doesn't have bricking in it, or if they're going to be bad draws, at least make them usable. Like Sword Risle is not a good draw to normal summon, but drawing it and normal summoning it, I don't feel like the world is over. I at least have options. Like, I get they're trying to balance it, but it's going to be a problem either which way, the way they've designed it initially. So they really haven't fixed any problems. Now, you can see me sit here and complain about decks like Gem Knight and Tempai that are now popping up in the meta as a hope to beat the Rogue Risle players and maybe Lancia out the what's called Maliss opponents. But in truth, I really don't feel like those are that a problem right now. Those decks may not even exist if we were in a healthier format, where they're trying to thrive on the sort of bullshit that exists right now, where lingering floodgates are the only thing that works. And when you build your deck so much to combat your opponent going first, going second decks have a little more room to breathe. Still though, those decks are not something I'm thrilled with as far as options. This is the predicament I'm finding myself in. Games end immediately to bricking way more often because you have to find space for non-engine. Games end to lingering floodgates, whether it be Maxi, Lancia, or Droll, like immediately. Boards are unbeatable, whether it be Risle or Maliss. Overall decision making in the game feels at an all-time low. I'll say that I've seen some people, cough cough Day, say that the format's not that bad and they're excited to play. And I appreciate optimism. I do like optimism, and I would love to come here with more like cheer and share some Christmas spirit and say that things are good. But I mean, I think TCG is better right now, but I don't think Master Duel is. I'll be blunt and honest when I think it's time. And usually good indicators if you're having fun. I'm not. Part of the argument is that you still have interesting games. And yes, these can occur. For one in particular, I like when you follow Maliss. And if it's a Maliss mirror, you can get interesting games. Or games where both players draw a lot of cards like Impermanent Impulse. And then it becomes an actual navigation of using disruptions because both players have more non-engine than they do engine. But those, for the most part, ignore the lingering floodgates. So they have to hope that doesn't happen. But also, it doesn't happen that often. Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end of the day is still Yu-Gi-Oh! We haven't gone that far removed, thankfully, that it's entirely flipping coins. It still feels like these situations happen significantly less than they do before. And understanding the Duelist Cup is about volume of games being played as well. When you play 300 games, there will be a fair number of them that can end up being interesting and skill testing. And that's why probably what will happen this weekend is still the better players will do well. But for me in a game, if it's good 1 every 10 games and have to spam constant games for it to be enjoyable, that's not a good game. I'd rather that most of the games are good and there's occasional bad ones than the inverse. And I feel like that should be obvious, but I'm still gonna refight this because some people say they have fun playing still. And I mean, they're allowed to have fun. But for the most part, it really isn't. There are many games that really just are not interesting. And I'm rolling my eyes. Just, yep, here we go again. Oh, on top of the Lancia and Maxi minigame, there's the call-by minigame now. Oh, you don't know how many times I've had, like, double Lancia and they go call-by on the Lancias. Or I have call-by and my opponent Maxis me and I call-by it and they Lancia me and I'm playing Risle, so I'm like, nice, the Lancia that's supposed to be dead against me now screws me over. Lingering floodgates are a problem. They need better disruption for going first, or for going second, so you can, like, combat going first. That's not lingering floodgate based. And they need to tone down these combo decks in a way where at least it feels like you have choke points you can interact with, because right now this feels terrible. And I guess I'm just reliving memories from the TCG, but it's worse because of Apo, Link Decoder, and Maxi. They've just made it worse. I am curious if anybody does actually enjoy the format, and if you do, I'm not attacking you, just I'm curious. Explain your reasoning. Be genuine here, right? Because again, I want to have a forum where we can communicate friendly, in a friendly manner with each other, which I know doesn't always happen. And I'm sorry if I perpetuate that to any degree. Call me on my shit if I do, but civility is important. And yeah, I will still be playing the Duelist Cup. I don't think I'll be streaming it because I want to try focus, and it does distract me. I might record my run and then post it onto the highlights channel afterwards. You can find the link for down below. So subscribe to that channel if you haven't already to keep up with that. But hopefully it goes well for me. And the thing is, just because Master Duel is bad right now doesn't mean it will always be bad. Keep in mind that I think last year around this time, we felt TCG was worse with Snake Eye, but Master Duel was better. There were less Omni-Nates in the game, and even though Fire King and Yubel were strong like they were in the TCG, without cards like Vaudeo and Fiendsmith cards, it felt like you had more real games and you could actually break through fields and play. Format wasn't perfect, but it was a fine format. So things can change for both the TCG and Master Duel. You may see the roles reversed once again, and I hope that Konami's paying attention to what we're saying so that they can fix stuff. Now, I'd like Maxi to go, but there's other problems besides Maxi that need addressing right now. And I will certainly hope that they pay attention to this to not kind of create these environments again, especially because there's more Duelist Cups in the year, and hopefully by the next one, I'll feel more happy about going into that event. Anyways, guys, it's my rant for now. Hopefully next time I'll come to you guys with the rants. It'll be one praising Konami and the format. But yeah, all right, peace.